Yep.
Okay, well, welcome everybody to our second official meeting. Official meeting, yes. Actually, it's our third. It's our third official, and it's our third.
Second, the first one, yeah.
Yeah,
Second for you.
well, I'm in a position doing this, yes. So, I guess we'll move on to the thought and pledge of allegiance. Do you have something to share?
I do. I'm just gonna say that.
Okay.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we are grateful that we have this opportunity to meet in favorable circumstances and that we have a community in which to celebrate the freedoms that we enjoy. We pray as we meet here today that we can be blessed with thy spirit and that peace can prevail, and most importantly, that we can have the thoughts and inspiration to know how to help our community move forward at the different needs and priorities that our members and our citizens feel. Pray for thy spirit this day in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we'll move on. Action item review. Not quite sure. Did we,
So, yeah. Did we,
I was gonna say minutes. Should we, is everybody,
I think Bill was the only one that said, looks good.
okay,
Good to me.
okay. I
Okay,
thought
great.
that looks good as well.
Try to keep one page short and sweet. So the two actions were pulled for me. Update the member list, send out to committee, which I did. Joyce has got it. And then get the charter figured out. And so
Yes.
back and forth with the mayor about 17, well, exactly 14 minutes. And then, so I think I sent that out to everybody, right? Like, one thing I couldn't find. I sent it out to everybody. If not, I have a hard copy here, people can look at
I
it.
think a hard copy would be good and to go over it so that we all understand exactly what.
And read it or just pass it?
I think reading it would be good. I think we've been kind of, last week we were still kind of unsure
Yeah.
with real clear.
So, basically it was the mission. I think everything else was, everybody was fine with, but, so the mission, the first one, explore and recommend to the city council options for cost. That's pretty. Provide any feedback to the city council related to colon. Is the city doing something it shouldn't be doing? Is the city doing something they should be doing? And then also ideas to better serve the community and streamline processes. So that's the kind of, and then the last thing was, I think we kind of worked through that is to try to find these, make sure that, you know, you can explain it to someone that wasn't sitting through everything. So,
Yes. Okay, I think that's great.
so,
That's-
Nice and succinct.
Mhm.
but anyway, so that's. Could have.
Yes,
And then
no, thank you. I appreciate that. I think that's really clear and it'll give us something we know we're working towards as we listen to each budget.
We have that sent out to everybody.
I think I did, but I
Did you?
I will do that.
I don't know if I saw that.
All right. Action number one. Send out.
Okay, so I think that was great. I'm happy to have that. So we will move on to number 2, budget review, and have you connect with the department.
It's me.
Hand it over to you, Chris.
So everybody have a copy or knows what I'm talking about when I say budget? And just pick a department and go. Which yellow sheet do you want?
I've got water here, which is the same budget sheet I was planning on talking about.
That's even better. All right. So pull that one out. I'm still back. So it's a single.
You want this light off so you can see?
Yeah,
Not better.
That'll help you see.
yeah, I will see.
So it's should be pretty quick if you guys can. Let's see. Uniform allowance, okay. So if you haven't figured out quite yet, there's a Rosetta Stone, and that is that little number on our, left-hand side as you go down, it's got 5-1, then a dash and 40, then dash and 140. If you look over onto the other sheet, so if you go from the yellow sheet to this other one that John's going to talk about, it matches. So, obviously on the main budget page, you're not going to have, on the yellow sheet, you're not going to have salaries, stuff like that. So it's going to be everything else. And what the yellow sheet does is kind of do a little bit deeper dive. So like main budget line, you have uniform allowance, and it's a solid number, $5,000. So, so what do you want to know about that? Well, it kind of goes into a little bit more detail. It breaks it out 2 more times to clothing allowance and, what's that? Boots for leaks. So, and if you keep going down, you can scroll down, you can see all of those things kind of match up to what you have. I mean, you even have weird things like, I'm trying to think what looks like a weird thing. I think there's a bad debt on here one side, so that's, they go through every single thing they can think of. Obviously miscellaneous is a little bit weird, but if they go into minor, purchase equipment, that's kind of be a big one towards the bottom, 740, if you look down farther, but that one, basically, you have, what they're planning on for that year. They're replacing something, let's see. They had one last year. So this year, yeah, so you can kind of see what the increase is on the right-hand side. It talks about what the up or down is. Doesn't have it on this yet, but on the real ones, it goes from last year, this year, budget year, and kind of goes, why is it so ginormous, or they might be taking something out. So
It looks like this is just a drill down into the expense.
it's a drill down, yeah, and they're yellow because they're yellow, so that's what, the nickname.
Yeah.
But really, it's that's kind of the fine tooth comb type of thing. And really, when it comes right down to it, it's kind of a, I don't know. It helps to see the bigger picture and why things are going up or down. When you see it on the budget line, you don't really have any scope to it. The yellow sheets kind of dig into it and figure out why that goes up or down. And that's what I started doing originally was, going through the budget from year to year and seeing what are these ginormous change, not ginormous, but hitting the big changes, big number, big ticket changes, kind of drilling into that to kind of see if there was any savings. For the most part, it is usually equipment related. Sometimes it's salary or insurance, like they were talking about last council meeting, that insurance rates are going up, and that's something that you can't technically plan for, which is the bad thing. This is all stuff Brenda, so you're good.
Okay.
So I guess, any questions, I guess, because it's really, and that's what I was using it as, kind of looking to see what the changes were and if there's any savings, how much, chlorine goes up there.
Can you go back up to the top? You can see those column totals. Okay, so that's the 2025 budget.
So they start with what,
2024 total, and then the percentage change.
And the number is always the end of the year. So like right now, we're in the 24 budget because the budget ends in 24.
Right.
So, yeah,
For 2025, you don't even start with.
right. That's the process you're helping us with, is the 2025 budget.
and that's what they start with, is what they had last year. That doesn't mean they have to spend it.
And I should probably say, this is just the blank form.
Yep.
It's gonna be exactly the same from
But
this
they
year.
always do that. They always start with what they had last year.
Well, so
The
that's,
budget.
we've looked at going zero based, where you say, okay, start with what do you need, like nothing. And what we always find is so many of the stuff we do is things that are continuing. So we say, well, we know we need clothes, so what do we spend last year? And so zero based budget a lot of times ends up getting us to the same point. And so we've just auto populated it, but that's why I think those questions that Council Member Pulver was asking about was, what do we do what are we doing we should be? Can we do it better? What are we doing we shouldn't be? And what are we not doing we should? And that kind of conversation would, in theory, eliminate potentially some of these yellow lines in some departments or entire departments if we said, hey, you know what, we really shouldn't be in the water business. We should sell everything to Bonavista and just get out of the water business. Like, that's in theory something the council could consider.
Questions? Theories?
I'm curious to know what boots for leaks are. That just intrigues me as to what that.
Taller, they're basically not hip waders, but a taller boot. Because usually when they're down in the trench, there's, you know, usually at least a foot of water. Or more, yeah. And this is replacement, so it's usually, you know, Bob's boots are bad this year, so he gets a new set. It's not new sets for everybody every year. We replace them as they wear out.
And just for example, last year's yellow sheet, from 23 to 24, they went down 69. You know, so it's one of those things that it depends, you know, could go down, could go up, you know, like the subscription thing for 23 to 5, you know, went down, you know. And some of that, when I say go down, some may or may not be necessarily a good thing because it could be transferred to somewhere else. That's the other thing.
It's detail that I didn't necessarily expect.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
I bet we'll learn a lot of those in
Yes.
each department. You realize that isn't something,
But it's, I mean, to me, it was nice to see that, yes, there is building maintenance. Yes, there is preventative maintenance, which I don't know, some industries that people have been in, that is wholly neglected, which can really bite you in the butt. And, you know, that's something huge I'm grateful the city's doing. And that's that some of the detail in here is really good. And so once as Jamie gets them and each department kind of vets them, then we can go look at them to see if there's any huge differences between them. But that's what's coming for each one of these budget lines. But again, I mean, if you have questions about specific things, you know, postage and mailing services, you know, some of these things were kind of like the traffic, you know, don't hesitate to say something, because if it's something that's pretty ginormous, you need to find out, you know. Some of it's obviously sending stuff out in the mail to, as stamps go up, you know, because it goes to everybody, you know, so. And I think there's some kind of rules that you can't do that electronic, you have to, everything has to go through the mail or something like that for when you're sending out utility bills.
They have to opt in to electronic.
I swear I did, I swear I still did one. Anyway.
I get a receipt in the mail.
Do you?
Mhm.
I get nothing. Mine's totally email.
Yeah, right.
I don't know why I still get one, but it's been years, but I do get a receipt.
Yeah. Anyways,
Question on utility billing.
oh boy.
It's just a
I
question.
know.
Why, or I guess that's obviously a contracted service, to somebody in Washington or whatever. It just takes the payment enormously long for them to process. If I get my utility bill and I wait till I get the bill and I do the bill pay, it can't get there before it's late.
Don't you do the express bill then?
So that's, you know, I do a recurring bill pay and have to schedule it before I actually get the last invoice. You know, I want to be able to change a whole thing.
Well, all I'm saying is that there's a express pay where it comes out of your thing, you don't even have to do the bill.
I guess I should.
I still like to do bill pay because I do it with all my other bills, so.
But
Well, I think if we
We
find out,
usually get the invoice a little bit late.
And same by the time that they process the payment, send me an invoice, I can't, even if I do it the same day, it takes 5 to 7 days for them to cut a check and mail it to the Washington. And it'll be late.
Some of that's your bill pay, if you're doing it on bill pay. Because if you look,
So
it'll
they
say
pay
expected
bank
date.
It used to be local and it worked really good.
uh,
That's all I'm saying.
so I think as we plan out the meetings, Like, and we know that we're coming up to that discussion, these are the kind of questions we can come and be prepared. for.
Yeah, so
Because
definitely.
as I'm looking at this, I'm like, I have some questions that I'd love to ask, not necessarily big concerns, but just why is this, and this? So I think it'll be really good for us to plan out ahead so that we know coming in who's gonna be presenting and we'll maybe be, sorry, a little familiar with, you know, the budget already and what it looks like, so that if we have any questions, we can be prepared.
Yeah, and we should get the yellow sheets ahead of time as well, so that.
So are some of these allocations? These expenses, or are they all just an actual expense?
So everything on this sheet that is under the 23-24 column, under the new proposed, that's the current adopted budget. So that would include any amendments. The
Okay.
other stuff is actual expenses.
Okay, but do you allocate costs from like one department to another to come in?
Yes, there
I
are
was wondering
some.
If any of these were allocations.
So if you go down to the very last
Yeah,
one,
Telephone and,
admin general fee,
okay,
so that's the,
oh, okay.
so
So that's coming from the general fund or?
that's from the water fund to the general fund to cover things like mine and Jamie's time and
Yes.
other things like that, yeah. Yeah, and
So does yours get completely allocated out, your fund? I mean. the
No.
fund-
no, so a lot of it still hits the general fund. A lot of the expenses, cause you know, 50%, maybe a little bit more is stuff for like streets, parks, police, which are all general fund expenses.
So how do you determine those allocations?
Jamie has a fun formula that we look at every year and we track so we can see why it changed. And we just have dialed it in closer and closer every year to, a lot of it's best estimates. So like the amount of time that I might spend with water department is gonna change every year. Because we might be doing a lot of big projects or some contracts one year, and then the next year I don't do much. And so we're always kind of tweaking that and balancing it. You can see from the sheet, it has gone up the last several years based on that, but there's also motor pool in here. Water's quite big because there's motor pool expenses tied up in that admin transfer. Unless I just misspoke. No, that's right. Oh.
There's a motor police.
Oh, there is a motor pool lease.
John, do you
A
have
lot
that
of
line
that-
on the yellow sheet?
The reason why it's gone up is because we had some reorganization to where we created the administrative services department. Where before those salaries were included just directly in the line items. So now that administrative services department is now part of that admin transfer. Because it's all budgeted in general fund and then it gets allocated out.
So all the utility billing clerks used to be divided up, one in water, one in sewer, one, and now they're in one central department, and that's,
So Bill, you were asking where the motor pool was, or what were you saying?
No, I was just showing you where that,
Yeah, we're just looking to see if there's.
where that
detail on
admin
there.
fee general. Yeah, and that there isn't a lot of detail on the 5149.
So then it looks like that the water department doesn't transfer any funds to other.
The only one they transfer to is the motor police, which is 514250. But they transfer to the general fund. Those are the two allocations. So the 250 to motor pool and then the 900 to general fund.
What else?
So will we be able to email, as we set up the agenda, email the, yellow sheets to everyone the week before, include them in the packet? In our meeting packet?
When, yeah, it's basically when they're done,
Yeah, Cause that,
John / Jamie will let us know. who
and then we
can be
can, yeah, cause they'll,
tagged to your type of thing.
So this, I do have another question. I'm looking at the capital projects. And then I'm looking at the credit. Does that mean you actually put that in, it's being capitalized? I guess I don't understand what the debit and credit is. there.
Yeah, so the reason why we have capital projects and then we have the
Credit is because you already,
transfer is because, so that council can see the projects from year to year. Otherwise, they would really never know how much cash is being spent, but because it's not because it's an asset, right?
Right,
That's why
right,
we take it off to move it to the balance sheet. So it's a,
so once it's completed, then you take it out.
yes, it's a budgeting tool, so that
Okay,
year
yeah.
over year, everybody can,
Yep.
it's transparent.
So that's not the same as your depreciation,
No,
which you've got down here.
And another thing that comes into that component is there's several things that developers build and give to us that show up on the balance sheet as assets
Right.
and that's depreciation and future, liabilities as they get replaced. So, or need to be in 50 years or 100 years or whatever the pipe life is.
okay, do we have any more questions about the yellow sheets? And how they connect with the departments?
So to answer your question, I think, the schedule on who we can bring in, so to speak, really depends on who
Of
finishes.
the
what.
yellow
So
sheets, but yeah,
It's kind of dependent on what Jamie and John have. or can.
And Jamie, usually the first groups that are ready, I mean,
so everybody has till March 15th, and I only have one department actually returned. So. Everybody's still
usually the
working
way it
hard.
goes, isn't it?
yeah.
They're still all working really hard.
But so in theory, if the group wanted to talk about one next time, we couldn't tell you today who it is, but probably within a
Yeah.
week, we will know who's
So
ready.
that we could kind of have discussions that coincide with how it'll be discussed at the council meeting, so that as we have those discussions, we can watch the council meeting and then their interaction, and maybe that's when I think, any suggestions we have, it would be better to have them, I think, given to the council when that department is. Otherwise, they just get it at the end and it's already done and presented and.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, you got
When's the council meeting?
I was trying to find my paper.
that paper?
Where I have.
There's one on the 12th and one on the 26th. And I think our budget,
Yeah,
The 9th is the first expenditure and then admin. The 26th is budget highlights, revenues, priorities, and future.
Is that March, April?
March, yeah, sorry.
so that'll be, the budget highlights is where Jamie will kind of say, okay, here's some big things that should be on the radar. Things to be aware of.
That's March 26th.
yes.
Okay.
So we will have a meeting on the 20th that we can decide what we want to talk about. Leading up to that.
Big
Council
stuff.
meeting.
Yeah, that's kind of, I don't know what this group's gonna jibber jabber about, but I mean, if someone has an opinion for a big thing, then yeah, definitely bring it up.
Oh, I had that paper. I'm losing my mind.
This thing is that you're talking about,
Yes, but I have my own.
isn't it in that packet right there?
I thought so, but I've gone through it like 3
Right there.
times.
Isn't that it?
Oh. Yeah, I thought that was.
Okay. Wait, it's right there. So look again. Make sure it's not there.
My brain is. Floating in my
Oh,
head
yeah,
right
right.
now. Yeah, but
You've been burning in speakers too long.
not so much. I've been home sleeping a lot this last few days. So yeah, so we'll have one more meeting and then after that, it starts with enterprise funds and admin. So I think that we should discuss it before the city council does, so that any of our recommendations or things that we talk about can actually be given to, Chris can maybe take a few minutes and discuss it at city council with the council before that department is presenting to city council, so that if we have some good ideas, they can actually be incorporated into the discussion. Is that right? Do you think? Yeah,
Agree.
because I think last time the committee did really great, but they did a summary at the end. And so I think for us to really have an impact or have any benefit, I think it'd be great to include our discussions into the city council discussions. Whether we find something or not, you know.
And then the next meeting, same thing where,
Yeah, we just kind of stay.
I don't know if we can shotgun all of the enterprise fund and admin, but should.
So maybe we see
It might be a
about,
little bit rough.
maybe we take one of them and do that next meeting. We break it up since we've got 2 weeks.
Good.
We could do admin one time and enterprise funds next week, depending on what Jamie's got as
Just,
far as.
yeah, it depends what, when you say admin, how many that is, 'cause that could be a crap ton, depending. Because, let's just say, let me see. if I can-
Well, what I would say, what that means is how it will be discussed within the council meeting is what that means. Cause yeah, I realize there's administration of
There's
Parks
that
and
many.
Rec and all of that, yeah. So
Yeah, but you could still probably go through those pretty quickly if we look at those are the high dollar items that
yeah,
look like they're changing quite a bit.
'Cause it took us a crap ton of time to.
I don't think you need to go through the real small ones.
no, I think we should just take, next week if we did, enterprise funds, or in 2 weeks, sorry. Or administration, with either of those, is that it's. I'm trying to do it before council meets, so, but I don't, you know, but we don't want to cause,
So the next meeting would be on the 20th, is what you're saying?
yes.
Well, I don't see why not. I mean, I asked them to have it by the 15th. I just don't know how quickly I can get it to you.
Okay, and I think,
Through. But I also want to remind that we don't. The tentative isn't really adopted until May 14th, and then the budget isn't passed till June, so I feel like there's like this rush, but there really is still some time.
yeah, and I don't think that a lot will change in that time. I think we're just basically looking to have a general discussion as to how it runs and what.
Right.
Does anybody else, I mean, I realize that it's gonna be changing, it probably changes.
Well, I guess I don't know why we're waiting for that budget to come without looking at like this
Right.
year's budget.
When we can.
Because if it doesn't change and you're not doing a zero, you know, why can't we look at last year's budget and look at the high dollar items and then go from there?
You can.
I mean.
And then
yeah,
as the
we
new
totally
ones come
can.
in. I mean, yeah, maybe we can even look at their yellow sheets for their budget, just to see.
I can pull them, as long as you don't mind my scribbles all over the place, you can make a copy of those. I think I just don't have.
Cause I know what you're saying, you know, it's so preliminary at this point that it's kind of hard to.
Bill, do you-
I think the advantage though, in looking at what's coming is every year, the different departments, and particularly the enterprise departments, that's where large budget items are gonna come. Right? In, public works, we have a need for snowplows,
Right.
right? And
So
those
maybe
are
we look at
$300,000-400,000
Yeah.
a piece. And so in the preliminary budget, and what Jamie's saying is, you know, that tentative budget that gets passed on May 14th, or is it May 14th? Yeah,
Mhm.
May 14th, is really just kind of a working document,
Right.
right? It's not really even etched in sand at that point, let alone stone. And so it just kind of is, okay, this is the general idea of where we think we can land this year. And that includes, there will be some scrubbing that occurs already at that point, right?
Mhm.
Public Works might come in and say, best case scenario, we would want 4 snowplows at $350,000 a piece. And then part of that initial scrubbing that we can go through, that we can help provide is, okay, where's the revenue for that? What's the impact on public works, the different enterprise rates? How does that impact the city overall? Can we do 4? Do we need to come back to 3? And then that helps get us to that May 14th preliminary first stab at it. And then we still have another month to help council refine I remember last year, Jamie on that May tentative budget, how much did we scrub from that point to June? It was a bunch,
I remember.
I don't remember that.
but it was hundreds of thousands that ended up being scrubbed from, if I remember right, from May to June. On top of, those initial requests that came in from the departments that had been scrubbed prior to that tentative budget, so.
I think the way it worked, and I'm gonna use round numbers, but we probably scrubbed from like March 15th of last year when the yellow sheets came in to the tentative budget. The staff and council probably scrubbed 600,000 or 700,000 out. And then a couple of 100,000 after the tentative budget, because oftentimes the tentative budget will say things like a use of fund balance to show that the balanced budgets or the budget balances, but that's not the goal, is to use fund balance. The goal is to fund everything with the revenues we get for the year.
We also, as we get into that tentative budget in May, we have more revenue that has come in, right? We have more of the lagging, frustrating as it is, the lagging 2-month sales tax revenue. We have a little bit stronger trend that we can deduce on where do we think our revenues, because one of the things last year that led, Chris, you'll remember this from the Citizen Budget Committee, was that we saw a slowing, we'll just call it a slowing of sales tax revenue. So where it wasn't coming in as strong as it had in the past, and the trend line was that it was going to continue to slow, then we had to, the Citizen Budget Committee, councils, department heads, we all kind of had to look at this and go, okay, we're probably not going to have the revenue we thought we were going to have 3 months ago. So now we've got to pull some more out, and we've got to triage some things.
I found them in my email folders, so, I mean, if you want, I can send it out, people can read it if they want, but it's an initial cut, I mean, it might not be. It's just gonna be what they had last year. If that helps, then great, if not, it's up to you guys. What's your thoughts?
Well, my thought is, as we're moving forward, what kind of discussions are we looking at having? That's why I think, looking at the tentative budget, we're not, I don't know that we're looking at rewriting the budget and going through everything so meticulously. We want to, what does a tentative budget look like? And, kind of discussions, can we do anything better? What aren't we doing? I think things like that.
I mean, if you're looking for that, then really looking at the current budget that we have, that's through, what is it? It's through September, I think is the official one. That was published in December, right? The last quarterly thing. I mean, that's really what you can look at. I mean, if you want to look at overall budget, the yellow sheets just kind of dig into it, but like we were saying, do we chat about the?
Well, that's what I'm,
Judicial
like if we're
budget,
looking at last year's budget, we're not gonna be really much help in, saying, hey, we can see these things coming up. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Where if we're looking at the upcoming tentative budget, whether we know it's just a tentative budget, they're gonna, it's still gonna give us ideas. We're not gonna be picking it apart, I don't think.
Right. But going to what, John's point was, if we, as the group, if someone sees, why are we doing this and why aren't we doing this? I think that was kind of the initial thought too, is that looking at maybe the yellow sheets from last year, at least currently, and then if there's an update to them, great. But if you're looking for just, overall, what should we be doing different?
Because I feel like we're being stagnant right now because we're in the waiting game.
We for sure are.
So here we come to these meetings, we're not getting very
This
much
meeting,
done.
I think was,
But you have to
Was-
understand the yellow sheets.
I
yeah,
understand. I
this
know.
one,
That's why
is a little bit more to get direction. Now, let's answer all of our questions on how the budget works, what we're looking at, and let's make sure that we've got a solid plan moving forward. So,
I don't think there's any issue, any problem with sending out last year's yellow sheets. if you want to look at them, look at them. It can certainly give you information, though it may not necessarily inform you for the next
Right,
year's budget.
Mhm.
But it can
Yeah.
help you get a historical perspective. I think of the enterprise funds in particular. Their expenditures can vary quite largely from year to year. Because of capital projects and things like that are there one year that aren't there the next. There can be quite large, and without, looking at last year's budget may not be indicative. I'm thinking of not this coming summer, but the next summer as a city dig the new pond.
I was gonna
And we
say
get into
that's
that.
gonna be-
That's going to be a huge project with quite a capital outlay that will, if we were to graph year by year expenditures, that would be a spike that would show. But I don't see any issue.
But that's pretty much a given, so there's not really something that we can do to help with that, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's for sure a given,
Well,
but
there can be though, because in some of our capital projects, we've been able to find, a thing here, a thing there that we can self-perform that saves, 10, 15.
Within the capital.
Right,
Build up that-
when we did the public works complex, John, how much did we self-perform there? We did a lot.
Yeah, we did quite a bit.
There were a number of things. I mean, we had employees that were excellent excavators. We had equipment. And so rather than contracting that out, we performed it in-house. And we're able to save quite a large amount of money. I think Brenda had her hand up.
I kind of understand what you're saying, but, the committee last year went through the yellow.
Sheets,
Sheets.
Through last.
yellow pages, that works.
Been through the yellow sheets, so there wouldn't be any point, I don't think, for this committee to go through last year's yellow sheets. And when they have them like this, they have the 3 years compared. What I'm interested in is what they've added to the budget for this next year. That's just my opinion.
Over and
like you
above
said,
this, over and above last year.
Yeah,
yeah,
what are the departments requesting this year on the budget that they didn't have on their budget last year?
yeah.
So you look at the comparison, oh, this budget, they want $50,000 more this year than they did last year. Why? I think you kind of have both of them.
If we look to what you're saying here on this is the water fund. Yeah.
Mhm.
The water fund, if we look at total expenditures. 2021 fiscal year was just over 2 million. 21-22 is 2.8. 22-23 is 2.6. But then 23-24, the year that we're in now, was budgeted at 5.1. Right, that's a pretty big jump. Now, the committee last year did a great job of going through the yellow sheets and identifying why that increase needed to be there, found it to be appropriate and all that kind of good stuff. But this year's expenditure, can't think of all the projects there might be that would include, but this year's expenditure might be the same, it might be significant. It's interesting to find out.
But I think the biggest takeaway, at least for myself, from the yellow sheets, it divides things out, but you go back to the main budget sheet and you look at some of the capals, like what I was talking about is the capital projects. And to me, it's salaries and the benefits, sometimes there's insurance in it too, but that are kind of the expenses that kind of smack you in the face that can't change us. Well, you can, want to reduce staff, or increase staff, depending on what you're doing. So to me, that's kind of the key thing is if you look down underneath and you start looking at some of the first thing, preventative maintenance is next, and then depreciation is another. So you're looking at the big things.
So what you're saying, and I know what you're saying, there's some of these that are the fixed expenses, there's nothing that you can do about.
Yep.
The
You
biggest
want to look at are the
ones.
variable expenses where maybe,
Mhm.
And that's what might be
That's the way
informative
it
to
is.
you for having last year's sheets, is you
Yeah.
can go through and tag for yourself. This looks like a variable expense versus a fixed, and then can come and ask questions based on that.
But at the same time, I think somebody was saying that, you know, our time doesn't want to be stagnant, but at the same time, we won't got a rabbit hole and, you know, save 30 cents because, you know, we're trying to. Spam's killing me today.
And you guys have a benefit over us because you saw the yellow sheets.
I actually didn't, I
Oh,
watched, I
whoever
wasn't in
did,
the
yeah.
committee, Brenda did, I listened to a lot of the meetings, but I watched the budget process from council for the last 5 years, so. You know, I watch when the department heads bring, you know, what it is they're requesting for the year and the discussion and negotiations of why they want that, and so I think that that's, really interesting and, discussions we would benefit having, you know,
This
is
is in this budget thing right here, right, for each one?
Yeah.
each department
Yes.
has one of those, yeah.
So, yeah, and
So my thought, maybe, I don't know about you, Chris, but what if we look at some of these and if there's something that looks like they're kind of different, we wouldn't understand, then we get a yellow sheet on it, just to see what makes that.
well,
up.
I could throw the last year's ones easy.
Because a lot of
And then
these
as
are,
they come in.
common expenses that you know you're gonna have, there's really, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's why I think if we plan out each department that we're gonna have discussed, we can get it beforehand. To have some time going over it so that we know what we're already,
Cause I mean, the simple things like, are you going to Costco? I mean, are you combining things so that the planning department is not going to the store to get stuff and then, you know, judicial, all those little things, no, everything's consolidated, everything's, you know, they're not being stupid and going to pick a very expensive store to go to versus the cheapest place you can go to. I mean, there was a discussion about, you know, do you go North Ogden or, you know, so there was discussions about that, but for the most part, they're doing most of the consolidation slash, you say cheapness, but that Brenda considers too, so we could possibly think of, so.
So I look at this power for pumping and it's gone down. Quite a bit, actually, 40K.
And there are reasons for that.
Yeah, and that's why, yeah, I'm sure there are.
Right, even though the cost of
Springtime.
electricity has gone up.
Because in a dry year, you have to pump it up the hill, in a wet year, you don't have to.
That's,
Oh, I'm guessing, he's
No.
shaking his head. Yes.
Huge part of it when
Yeah.
we were.
but it's a good
when we
question
were
to
in-
ask,
So
so we know.
that's why
an
we,
example.
yeah, so we'll get a budget, and if we've got the yellow sheet for this year, great, if not, we can kind of look at last year's, but that way we've
Yeah.
got something to
Yeah.
be discussing with each one, we can come kind of familiar with, if we break it down, we can come familiar with that budget.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, and I guess Chris and I can work with Jamie on what would be best and, you know, maybe on this schedule. So that we're not overwhelming or, you know, causing people to rush. We realize that it's just it's very tentative, but it gives us something to discuss, I think. So,
Then she got a bigger hammer too. Committee needs to have.
So that, what you got here is all of this stuff right here, right, the budget worksheet.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
we've got that.
Because John was gonna discuss this part for his section, but we kind of already done it. So,
Oh, is John gonna do something today?
yeah, John is gonna,
Okay,
It ties right into what we're talking about,
good.
which is, but I was gonna give you a little more details on salaries and part-time folks like that, stuff like that. And so it worked out to have these printed out, you know, obviously you have your own copy. They're just double-sided, but this, we obviously, everyone knows we have revenues and expenses. Every fund, so there's 12 of them, something like that, have a revenue line and expense lines. And so in the water fund, you can see that we get interest, we get sale of assets, meter rentals, the miscellaneous revenue, and then the ARPA funds is what we have, and then utility revenue, and we have as a separate line. But some of those that are a little unique, the meter rentals are contractors who come and they get a meter that hooks to a fire hydrant. And that way they can fill up their water trucks and things close to site, and it saves some wear and tear on the road. That's the kind of stuff is there. Miscellaneous revenue is all sorts of things. When we take old metal pipe out of the ground, oftentimes we recycle it. So that's a random revenue. Penalties, late payments, things like that will show up there. And then on utility billing, this is just our estimate on how many, we think we're gonna get. So it depends a little bit on how much everybody uses. So we kind of ballpark it.
So ARPA is basically the revenue you get from the bills.
No, ARPA was that federal money that, yep. And so we use that money to help us build the water tank on 2100 North. And so that's why there's nothing in there for the previous years, is we hadn't taken it and planned to spend it. So the utility revenue is the next area down, and that's the bills that the residents are paying. Our estimate is 2.6 million for this year. That goes up and down depending on usage, but also depending on the rates that council adopts. So one thing the council will be looking at, should they increase utility rates, the monthly rates per gallon or the base fee? Those are two components. So with water, we charge everyone a certain amount of money every month just because there's pipe in the ground in front of their house. And they also pay a rate based on how much water they use per 1,000 gallons. And both of those numbers can shift and move depending on what the council approves as part of the fee schedule. And that is part of the budget discussion for all of the utility funds. It's typically one of the last components that comes after the council scrubbed through the yellow sheets and the budget document to kind of say, okay, did we get things out enough to not increase utility rates? And that ends up being the tension, is increase rates or scrub things out that maybe we can not do this year, or maybe we don't need. So yeah. And then connection fees, those are new homes. And a lot of that, so connection fees is one of those unique ones that also will correspond directly with an expense, because we buy meters. And on this sheet, does this one show up under purchase equipment, Jamie?
Or one of those.
You said 410?
On your maintenance?
Or 412. It'll say meters.
Oh,
Meters,
it's
new
454.
No, 4, yeah, okay. So you can see that 78,000 lines up with the other 78,000. The idea being, if we buy less meters, then it means we get less revenue, but they'll correspond with each other. We do keep a stock of meters, but those have already captured in our asset management inventory that we do every year, or our inventory management, I should say. Salaries. This fund typically only has full-time folks. So the salary line is just the amount of money we pay or expect to pay those individuals for their time working at the city. Some departments also include part-time. And so that would be a different one. And then the employee benefits includes the benefits paid to full-time and part-time folks. So both groups get some set of benefits. Full-time typically get medical, dental, that sort of thing offered. Retirement in the URS system, the Utah retirement system, as well as our 401k program, is given to all employees, regardless of if they're a full-time, part-time. It is not given to seasonals. So when you get into parks and the aquatic center, we have seasonal employees there, as well as some permanent employees. And the seasonal don't get the 401k and the URS benefits or health and medical dental. They basically just get FICA and the taxes that we pay for payroll.
Accumulate your employee benefits into one area and then allocate them out to each department, or does it just
It's done automatically through the payroll system.
through the payroll system? Okay.
Yeah, and the benefits is somewhat a guessing game. Not every employee takes the same benefits every year. And some, for example, they might have a divorce involved in kids, and so they might have the kids on their their benefits one year and then the next year they switch off and on. And so there's some transitions that happen.
Because of, ACA. A lot of our public works guys are younger and they're still on the parent plan. And then so for a few years and then all of a sudden they have to demonstrate until they jump.
Yeah.
So.
And medical benefits cost the city anywhere from $600 a month to $1,400 a month, depending on the plan. And
So how much do we subsidize for that, or do we pay all of it, or?
it also depends on the plan the individuals pick. So that we typically are in the 90 to 95% range. 95% for those who pay are part of the high deductible plan. But then the city also gives them a contribution to their HSA. So in some ways it almost feels like it's 100%. And then those closer to 90% are on the traditional plans with usually an 80-20 deductible. And the city has just two plans as the option, with, single, two-party, worker with kids, and then a family plan. So there's technically 8 plans the city offers, but they fall into those two categories. And that is something that the council talks about every year. Salaries is a big thing that comes up. General fund salaries is almost 50% of the budget in the general fund. So we get roughly $10 million in revenue, and we spend about 4.6 on salaries, or that I think is what we spent this year.
So is it budgeted in for a yearly raise or a midpoint, every 6 months, I guess?
So we budget for an annual raise. If we see the market shifting dramatically than we have in the past, budgeted for a mid-year increase. This current year we're in, we didn't budget for it. We did do the study and found some employees that were outside of the range, but not far enough that the council adjusted the budget or made an amendment to accommodate that. We compare ourselves with other cities, and we could show you that as a future meeting where I could show you the reports that we look at, and it just spits out. This is
Escalation factor we put into that.
we build one in. Honestly, for the past 7 years, we have been playing catch up. So there was a while there where we didn't stay up with the market, and we've spent 7 years catching up to it. And so we haven't got to the point yet where we are estimating what others will be jumping. Jamie's part of a group, I'm part of a group, and our human resource director or human resource person's part of a group, where we are trying to see what everybody else is doing so we can get some numbers. Most cities are 3 to 6% every year. Some cities are crazy. And I'm going to say it that way because they might have a larger sales tax revenue or other revenues to where they're in the 9-10% range and have been for a couple of years. And so, but the last couple of years have had a higher, probably 6 to 7% as we've been playing catch up. Some positions it's been 3, and other positions it's been 10. The last several times we've capped the increase at 10%. Just because we just can't catch people up all of it in one swoop. But as we replaced positions, we did bring them up to market so if we hired a new water worker, well, that's a bad example because we tried to move everyone together. So we didn't have a new person coming in higher. But if we hired a new, our police chief position's out now because Chief Quinney's retiring. So he's currently at market or close to it. And so, but the chief will come in at market. So that's also a bad example, but that's the type of thing that we're
Guessing when you do your research to cities that are comparable to.
Yeah, we look
size
at both. So we look at all the cities that are within 75 miles. And then we also look at cities of our size, which is 10 to 25,000 people or residents.
Times long. But the problem is some are not.
Yeah, I know that one, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there's not much you can do about
And that's
that.
why we look at both. And we focus more on the 10 to 25,000 for most positions. There's a few like law enforcement where we also really care about 75 miles. So to see what people could move, driving distance for a new position. And then we just work with the numbers and try and be as fair as we can. But it's a large component because, 3% of $4.6 million, you're at 120,000 really quick. And so it's just one of those struggles that we have. One of the nice things and this goes back to the discussion about programs is, there are so many more things that are coming out. We've been able to not refill positions of individuals have left in some departments because technology has made it possible. So some people might have moved to a new position because they found a better opportunity or just, needed a different change. And so we were able to evaluate, implement some technology and not rehire those positions and save the city some money. I think because we're a service industry, it will always require some people, but there are things that have helped. Most of you probably remember the people who were driving motorcycles or cars around reading meter pits. So they used to physically open every lid and read the meter, write it down and go to the next one. It then went to a vehicle-based radio system. So then they were driving the city once a month. And now we have a radio-based wide system that we read every meter every day. So we can, and it also helps catch leaks, but that has kept us from having to add people in the water department as we got more and more connections.
Does that install?
The ones that we installed a couple of years ago had that capability.
Okay.
And the new ones that we will be doing in the next 5 years will also keep having that. But it also helps with leaks because we can see if the meter starts spinning. And if someone's using 3,000 gallons a day, then we can call them up and say, hey, check your toilet, check, see if you've just got water running. They did that when I was in Colorado a couple of years ago. We left the house and had someone come over to feed the fish. They used the restroom and the flapper got popped open and stuck open. So we had a high meter read, but we were able to catch it at day 2 of our vacation. So the same person came back and fixed it, fixed the flapper, but it would have been dramatic if we came back 8 days later and had, used that much water. Then, and this goes into the yellow sheets, all the most important code on there. Well, there's 2 important codes. The first code tells you the department, the first 2 numbers, and the last 3 numbers tell you the line. So you can look up on here, 5140-140 is the uniform allowance. Every single department, the 140 is uniform allowance. And if the department doesn't have a uniform allowance, then there's not a 140 line that shows up on their yellow sheets. In theory, the line is still there, but that helps us track so we can look at different departments and say, hey, what's the 140 line on all the utility funds and why? And that helps with some of the understanding. This detail helps you see, the sewer department doesn't necessarily get boots for leaks, but they get different specialty equipment for the stuff they deal with. They might have more of a uniform maintenance fund because they're getting cleaned more often, just because of the nature of their job, or they might have coveralls or things like that. Some of the ones that are unique to the departments, we talked about the meters, the new connections. There's not another department that has meters because sewer, we don't meter the sewers that leaves the house, and same thing with stormwater. But so many of these, and the reason we picked water fund is it kind of covers a wide array of everything. And we don't really need to jump into all of them because of the in-depth we did with the yellow sheets, just barely. But I'd be interested if any of you have any questions about those or stuff you just want a little more detail on, and we can talk about whether it's unique to this department or the others. One of the big things, though, as you're looking at that is when you get to equipment, so something that gets confused a lot is equipment, small equipment, and office supplies. And we've provided guidance to our department directors and our supervisors on how to categorize things. Small equipment is typically something that will last a while, but it's not a 10-year piece of equipment. And it's usually over a certain amount. So all of our computers, printers, things like that will fall into small equipment as opposed to office supplies. office supplies are usually those intangibles that might not last a year because, you know, you lose a pen or you just wear it out because you write so much. And then other equipment, you can see purchase equipment, those sometimes and oftentimes end up being capital equipment. And it might be capital just because of what it is or how long it's going to last. Or we don't call it capital equipment because we might purchase something that we really only expect to keep for 5 years because that's the best turnaround on the money. So we might buy something, use it for 5 years and sell it as opposed to running it into the ground because we lose less money doing that than if we kept it for 20 years and ran it to the ground. A good example, and it's on this yellow sheet, is our trucks. So you've probably seen North Ogden, water, sewer, and other departments driving around in brand new trucks. So this is a program we started with Dave's help a couple years ago. And what we've worked out is we buy these trucks from the car dealers and we keep them for a year and we sell them back to them for what we paid for them if we keep less than 15,000 miles on them. And so what that has helped us do is there's a lot of capital tied up in those trucks, but we're not losing money that year or much money. The exception is when they do it, when they go to a new model, we typically have to pay for the cost difference between like a $46,000 truck this year might be 47 next year because they bumped to a new model and raised the price. But in theory, if it moves, then we would get that new price of 47,000 when we sold it back to them.
So you actually get the truck and then you turn it back in for what you paid for it.
Correct.
How did you make that deal?
It's
State contract.
Wow.
Yes.
There's incentives to
do that.
cities. So like this year coming up, there's, $3,000 in incentives to buy the Ford, and there's $4,000 in incentives to buy a Dodge. And so what we do is we buy that, then because there's that much savings, when we go to sell it, or when they go to buy it back from us, we bought it with all those incentives, so they're able to buy it back for the price that we bought it for.
Right.
Because there's still that much value on them.
Well, for trucks, I can see that.
And then the other program we have, and it falls in a different thing under probably equipment leases, which is they do have some in this department, but other departments, because we didn't have the capital outlay, we entered into some leases that are 12 months long. So the Tundras that you'll see in the back lot here, we lease those. Same thing, we have a limit on how many miles we can put on, but it's the same concept. We get them for so cheap. We spend $3,000 to lease them for the year. And then anything that they sell those trucks for more than what they paid for them, like meaning the leasing company. So say they bought them for 36 grand. We lease them for a year at $3,000. If they sell them for 38 grand, then they give us $2,000 back. So in theory, we just spent $1,000 to lease a truck. We're optimistic with the Tacomas that we might break even. We have done that in the past with some of our cars. The ones we made the most money on were actually the RAV4 hybrids that we owned a couple of years ago. I think our lease was $2,600 and they sold for 32. So we actually made $600 on those leases.
So your heavy equipment then, you were talking about snowplows coming up. Do you always do a buy or do you look at the leases as well? Or you can do a lease or a buy?
So on our earth moving equipment, backhoes and things, we've done leases. But we've also purchased. On the snowplows, they oftentimes will call them a lease, but it's a lease where we own it at the end. So it's really a financing program. And all of our snowplows we own essentially outright, or we will own by the time we finish paying them off. Even though they're called an equipment lease, and they're usually at really good interest rates. Although interest rates have moved quite a bit lately. And those, yeah. So there's a lot of things that Dave and Jamie have been working on over the past several years to just fine tune and get those numbers down. We spend anywhere, if you include the equipment purchases for snowplows, we are spending, I hate to say exactly what it is because it modifies every year, but it probably averages $150,000 a year when you're looking at depreciation and everything, up to 250 for the equipment and the salt and everything to plow the snow. So when you take that over 10 snowstorms or 12 snowstorms, then it starts looking like we're spending a lot of money per snowstorm, and we are, but safety is important. But that's one of those things that, again, we tried some unique things to see if we can figure out ways to save money. This year we got a new snowplow truck. What do we call them? Snowy One Kenobi. But it's a different platform. So instead of the really big trucks that you see if you live up on the hill, it's an F550 platform, which is still a big truck, but it's about half the cost. And so it can't plow the snow in every area of the city, but it works good down here on the flats. And so instead of having trucks that are $250,000 to $325,000, we can get one of these for $120,000, $140,000.
It also can be used during the summer, right? That the one factor that they're trying to do is.
Yeah, one of the other options, because it's smaller, we also have the ability to look at taking the plow off, right? Because they come off, and using it as a vehicle to pull our parks trailer around and our mowers and stuff. And that would save us on buying one of the diesel trucks for the parks. The caveat to that is it also means they can wear out quicker. But most of our vehicles wear out because of age as opposed to mileage. Yeah, Brenda.
Can you replace all of the big snowplows with those bigger trucks, or you still have to have the?
So we still have to have the bigger trucks, some of the big trucks. It'll probably, if we need to evaluate this new one and see how it really worked. But they're just not heavy enough on the slopes to get the traction we need to push the snow. And so the heavier trucks are probably going to always be required on the hill, which means at best we can probably hope for half and half.
It was scary going up with a big truck, going up top of Washington, and he was slowing down. I'm like, we gonna make it? He's like, I hope so. If not, I salt going backwards and then get a go and start going again. I was like, holy cow. Anyway, so
Yeah, if it's doing a ride along with snowplow is eye-opening. But I don't know, Dave, what's the feedback on Snowy One Kenobi?
It's just a little light, so the biggest thing is, we don't think we can use it probably about 3,100 much, just because of how light it is, but.
Yeah.
For traction and different things, but it has its place for sure, and I think it has a place, we have fine routes below that, so. I mean, we could definitely get into some of those trucks and put them down here on the flats. It's just.
Yeah. So those are just creative things that, Dave and he's unique, but he's also not unique in the sense that most of the department heads are really good at looking for unique ways to try and approach things. And we've seen a lot of savings over the year with just trying fun ideas. And they seem to be working out. So
police cars are different, right?
Yeah, police cars, there are companies that lease them, but you do not get hardly anything back on them. Usually they're sold to a beach patrol. A lot of the used vehicles end up being sold to lifeguard places. That's where the leasing companies sell them, because then they can run them for 2 years, and by that time they're just shredded because the sand gets into everything and ruins the bearings and things like that.
Because the key thing for police cars is that you have to retrofit them with all of our stuff. So it makes no sense to just do it for a year.
And we typically 4 to 5 years is the life of a police car. And then we sell it and buy a new one. And usually even those, they have a lot of hours on the engine because they idle quite a bit. That was brought up in years past. They have to idle to keep the equipment running, or in the case of the K9, to keep the K9 cold. So the K9 doesn't overheat in the summer sun. But they usually get about 60 to 70,000 miles before we let them go, which has some value on the market. But it's long enough that they really aren't good for much else. Our parks trucks, for example, by the time they get 70 or 80,000 miles on them, are easily 10 to 15 years old. And the police cars are 4 or 5 years old, and the police cars have gone through 3 or 4 sets of tires, brakes, all sorts of things. And the parks vehicles have probably replaced the tires because they got old. So they're on their second set of tires and, belts and little things like that, but brakes are probably the original. So different wear and tear on different vehicles. So anyways, any questions about any of these?
Insurance come in, like your
So,
property insurance and,
so that comes in part of that admin transfer fund.
okay.
So it will show up under our non-departmental on the budget. And it also is one of the biggest expenses that happens in July. And so it's close to 300 grand, close to 400 grand. Yeah, Jamie's giving me good hand signals. And it comes in July. So when you look at like our quarterly budget reports, July is really big in that department because we spend 85% of the budget on insurance in July. And then the rest of the year, we spend the other 15% for the non-departmental expenses. And then that, as I said, that shows up in the admin transfer.
Who do you insure for? Who do you insure for?
So we have a broker named Olympus. And we go out to RFP every few years. Well, usually it's 5 to 6 years. And then that broker pairs us up with an actual underwriter. I think we're with Trident now. And then there's also others. So we have insurance for vehicles, insurance for buildings. There's just general police and liability insurance. And then we also have insurance for cyber liability. So if we get hacked or things like that. And then there's other little insurances that are out there, and they're kind of all bundled under one broker, and they farm it out to the folks that are best. There's other options for insurance. When we switched from Olympus from our past insurance broker, we ended up staying with the same underwriter. We just had a different broker. But there are a few other options. The Utah Local Government Trust does some insurance, and that's kind of like a cooperative where all the cities that are part of it throw their money in, and then if there's a claim, in theory, all of their rates go up a little bit. We've had a lot of success going the traditional kind of commercial insurance route, in helping us keep our costs down and also still provide things that other entities might not have been able to cover under the local government's trust. So.
I have a
And-
question that
yeah.
may not have anything to do with it. When you were talking about new plans and stuff, do you have an incentive for employees that if they come up with ideas and they work, they get, $100 or anything like that?
We've talked about that. The current thing we do is we have the peak award, and we give it out to 1 or 2 employees a year and kind of highlight, what they've done, how they've saved the city money. And that comes with a $500 award. But it's not incentivized on the level of, hey, Bob, you did a really good idea. You saved the city $1,000 or saved the city $20,000. And so we recognize it. We've talked about it. Bonuses are really hard in government work. Just as another FYI, another thing we've talked about is if employees find free stuff or donations, do we incentivize that? It's this weird blurred line. Not everyone agrees with bonuses at the local government level or government level at all. And that's what they sometimes look like. And so it's hard and so we haven't developed a program that we felt comfortable pushing through yet, because it's kind of that weird area. How do you define it? How do you quantify it? It's not like you can just look at profit share and, say, oh, hey, the mayor gets a bonus because, we made this much money a year. It's a little harder to do that. But we do try to recognize.
Yeah, so they have, HR department has funds for monthly or quarterly, whatever, and they get something.
Yeah.
So,
And if you have ideas, I mean, we're open to hear them, because we really want to look at other options to make us more efficient. The fundraising one is one that's come up recently, because if we could go out and fundraise $100,000 using all of our employees, then if we could incentivize them to do that, then that'd be great. Because it wouldn't cost us $100,000 to incentivize them to raise that much, but
sell segment cookies, right?
yeah.
Samoas.
Yeah,
My husband's job used to do that and then come up, if they saved a certain amount, they would get, $100 visa. If they saved 5,000, they would get a $50 visa card.
yeah,
It was nice when it happened.
yeah. Well, and it's a great way to reward immediate behavior. So,
Well, and it worked really nice because those who were working with whatever the issue was, they're the ones that tend to have the idea of how to improve it.
mhm. Yeah,
Like whether or not to take something in-house, the make-buy decision sometimes is left.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
yeah.
Was it
So-
too often?
No,
No,
nothing's awesome.
Yeah, but you have to be.
oh, no, it's just the way you said it. It's maybe how to react.
Well, and one thing that, is I think, so if I, kind of going off what you were just saying, Brenda, like I try and as a group, when we have these, we kind of create what I like to call them conflict groups. If we can feel safe to throw out ideas and not have people say that's stupid, then we will come up with better ideas. And so if you've got a crazy idea, throw it out and please be respectful of each other's ideas, because sometimes some crazy idea that Chris Pulver is going to have is going to spur Phil Swanson or Stephanie to that, and then we end up with an idea that works really good. And so please share them and talk about them, because we're always looking for better ways to peel an apple. Yeah.
Throw the apple.
Well, I've been doing a great job. Some really cool come out and I'm like, I was.
Every
really
single
proud of
citizen
you.
should go through this, but. never have, but
Yeah.
Especially people that.
And
All right.
And one thing and please let us know, because when we go through the yellow sheets, especially, the superperson might say, "Oh yeah, we thought of that. Yeah, we tried that," and we'll try and work with them just to not make it sound like all your ideas are bad ideas. But
Yeah, but that's good for us to know if they've tried it.
well, but yeah, have you thought of this? And so we'll just work on phrasing to say, we've considered it, but we considered it this way, maybe, and so let's have some discussions and just keep the conflict group a safe place for everybody.
Does anybody have any more questions for John on that subject?
John,
Thanks.
Mhm.
That was awesome. All right, Phil, it's your turn.
Okay.
Let's hear about CDA and RDA.
I'm gonna go over here.
How that works.
Are you gonna drag it over?
Yeah, I wish I could.
You can. There's a wheeled one right there.
We didn't budget for that, John.
We stole it from the police.
Oh. You could put it down.
Yeah.
So are we gonna start having these meetings in the new building with the nice chairs that don't squeak?
We can probably bring some better chairs.
Just kidding, y'all.
I actually looked for the squeaker. You like to distract.
It helps with the.
You'll know I'm irritated if my chair goes.
What? Squeaker?
The plan is actually for this room to turn into more offices and a conference room. And so the conference room will be back against that door likely, and this group will meet in that conference room so public can come in and out as needed. But we likely will repurpose chairs that we no longer need in other spaces to replace these. Yeah.
Yeah, the belt will make it very good. There's one right over here that if you push, just lean back on it, it's so bad.
Very, very distinct.
So what I'm gonna show you is the unifying theory between general relativity and quantum dynamics.
Great.
Exactly.
Because we're gonna talk about CDAs, the community development area, that resides under the authority of the redevelopment agency, the RDA. So we used to have the RDA, the agency, that oversaw the RDA, the redevelopment area. And then we got the community development area. So we had an RDA over the RDA and the CDA, right? Got all that straight? So now we have the redevelopment area agency. under that, we have the community development area. So what the community development area is, it is a geographic location identified by the city, commercial land, not residential. It's all commercial, okay? Our CDA, John, runs mostly along Washington and 2600, correct?
Correct.
Yep. So if we have Washington Boulevard, we have 2600. There are areas that are specifically defined as the CDA. What happens in a CDA, let's say that there is on this corner here, this imaginary corner, there is this undeveloped piece of commercial land. Okay. And on an annual basis, this, because it's undeveloped, this undeveloped piece of land produces $10 in taxes to all taxing entities. So let's say we have these 10 taxing entities, each entity is getting, just for discussion purposes, $1 in taxes. Okay. Now let's
So who's
say,
getting the $1 in tax?
oh, this could be Northview Fire, North Ogden City, the county, the
Okay.
library system. All, you think of your property taxes, all those taxing entities, each one of those is getting $1. Mosquito Abatement District, the sewer district. All of those entities, the taxing entities on our property taxes are
So this
getting.
is the tax that we're having to pay for and then they end up getting.
Well, the person that's paying for it here is the property owner,
Okay,
right?
I thought you were saying that we own the property and
No,
not.
no, no, this is a commercial piece of ground that's owned by some private investor somewhere, but it's undeveloped. It's
Okay.
just a raw, think of the land that's just to the south of Zions Bank. Between the old house, just that parcel right there, where a Bank of America is going to go, right? Right now, it's just undeveloped. Okay, so it's producing $10 a year. Did I
Just
confuse-
because it's
No,
property and it's there, right?
No, it's the Bank of America.
What's that?
I said another bank.
Yeah, another bank, yeah. Now, let's say that an investor comes in and they develop this. Okay, so now the taxes that are paid on this on an annual basis go up to $110 annually. Okay. The difference between that, the original $10 and the new 110 is $100. And that's called the tax increment. Okay. Just for ease, each one of these 10 taxing entities would now be getting $10 each. Where they were getting one, they're now getting $10 each in that any new tax increment dollars, this $100. The way a CDA works is that the city goes to each one of these taxing entities and says, we would like you to give up a portion of your new $10 to us for the community development area. For a period of 20, what's the maximum now, John? It used to be 30, 32 years that we could do, but now it's like 25.
At the outside, it's most of them are 20 years now.
Most of them are 20 years. So we would say, let's say this is the school district. And this is Northview Fire, and this is the sewer district, and this is mosquito abatement. We would go to the school district and say, we would like you to give us 50% or whatever we negotiate with them, but for easy math, let's just do 50%. Say that each one of these agrees to give us 50% of their new tax increments. You notice we're not taking any of their original. It's just the new tax increment. So they all agree to give us 50% of that for 20 years. What that means is they don't actually collect for that 20 years $10, they collect $5 and the CDA gets $5. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So for that 20 years, That $5 rolls into that CDA, and then that CDA money can be used for very specific purposes within the community development area for redevelopment purposes. And that's how a CDA works. That's how these redevelopment areas work.
So are they easily swayed to do that?
They generally are,
Are they?
because as we take money that they give us from here, say, you know, the $50 a year that we get. And that means now that there's a larger piece here that just, it hasn't penciled well for this investor to develop. Like with Smith's Marketplace, right? When Smith's was going to leave their old place where the Ace is now, Smith's was not gonna come in, was not going to stay in town. They were, John, do you remember what the number was? I wanna say it was close to 300 grand.
Yeah, 250 to 300.
So let's say Smith's, we're saying, wow, Smith's Marketplace was here, the sales tax revenue, the property taxes, all of that really skyrockets if they're here. But they're saying, for us, it doesn't pencil to the tune of we're short about 300K. So what we can do is then go in and let's say we have $1 million in the CDA, we can pull from that 300,000 from the CDA. We can just give them the money. What we did was it the water main or was it the sewer main that we did there, John? Dave, do you remember?
We helped with the water, or the system, water system, because they looped that water system.
We took care of some infrastructure to the tune of just a little over 300,000. All of a sudden that makes it pencil for us. So now for the next 20-25 years, we have the sales tax, the property tax, and everything else rolling in that wouldn't have been there if.
That they get.
And so, and the money is really coming from this commercial district, not from homeowners, right? It's as we sell. And from each of the other taxing entities that are also, they're seeing an increase in their taxes for that 20 years. But we get a portion of that. The reality is, John, what do we usually get from the school district? 20-ish%?
They've been good at 50%, but the last one on the CDA, they only did 25, yeah.
And as the economy gets tighter, they're gonna be more stingy with their taxes as they build their Taj Mahal schools. Did they say that out loud? They need more revenues.
It's a little too, it depends on what that business is. If they're gonna bring 100
Exactly.
new people to the district, that means you're gonna have new housing and new income.
Right.
And whatever.
So, but that's how the redevelopment agency, the community development area, that's how the financing, tax increment financing works. It's not a TIF. Don't get confused. It's not a TIF. It is, but we are getting a portion of that tax increment over a period of 20 years, and each taxing entity is negotiated individually, and it will vary. Some will be 50, some will be 10, some will be 20. It just depends. And then when that agency expires, then you have a certain period, usually about 3 years, that you have to expend the money.
Who negotiates that? You do that?
John and the mayor,
No.
Jamie, I think you're
Wow.
involved. No,
The last one was mostly heavily the mayor, and then as a city attorney, I got involved in a little bit. They are harder to do now. The school districts are starting to say no across the state.
So you have the CDA, it's a program that lasts for 20 years.
Mhm.
And then it expires, there's no more CDA.
the tax increment money does not come, it stops. Like we had, I mentioned the RDA, the redevelopment area that was under the redevelopment agency. That just expired December 31st. And so there's, at the end of that, there was, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's about 3.4 million
Close
That-
enough.
was remaining roughly in the redevelopment area. Okay, what the law says is that by December 31st of 2023, we had to program that money. We had to say, this is how it's going to be spent
over the next 3 years that we have to spend it. At the end of that 3 years, whatever money is left, it's divvied back out to the individual taxing entities. So it is really in our best interest to program and spend that money and put it to good use for the development of the city than it is to return it back to the taxing agencies.
So, can the city do another RDA, or is that just a one-time thing?
Did we start a CDA now?
We could. They're harder to do.
Yeah.
And usually there's some sort of they don't want you just going, just on top of each other. There's usually a resting period on each individual piece of property. So the RDA and the CDA dealt with different parcels.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they kind of looked like teeth going down Washington Boulevard, right? So they came together, but no two were the same.
So when does the city CDA expire?
It's only, we triggered that just a few years ago, so we've got maybe 17 years left in it. 16, 17, something like
And
that.
then that's the same thing once it's done.
At the end of it, the council at the time will have to program where the money is anticipated to be spent, and then there will be a period of time, usually around 3 years, after it expires, that then the money has to be spent during that period of time. If you think back to when Lee's was acres, and that all of that kind of redo was done, that was all done with a lot of it with RDA money to help that, because we knew it was going to be such an economic engine for North Ogden. When Wingers turned into whatever it was, and then it was vacant forever, and then it became Hug Hess. Hug Hess came to us and said, hey, it would be, it's not gonna pencil real well for us to come in and put Hug Hess. We knew that it would be nice to have that sit-down restaurant, and it would be a good economic thing. So the RDA, some funds were used to help Hug Hess get in there. Who else have we done it with, John? Oh, the facade treatment of the strip mall north of Ace, a little bit with Ace Hardware, a little bit with Nielsen's Frozen Custard. All of these things that help increase that economic development sales tax.
But that CDA can go up, right? If you have another parcel that you get, or is it just set, like?
It is set. The
It's set,
CDA is, there are specific parcels up and down 2600 in Washington
Answer your question.
that are identified as being in the CDA, and we have to identify those before the CDA is triggered.
Okay.
And we trigger it, and then it's good for the 20 years. We can't expand it, we can't contract it.
And the money gained from it has to be spent in that.
On those
already
specific parcels, we can't
areas.
use it for other areas.
The project has to benefit that area.
Right.
And so you have to have a nexus that says, hey, if I do this project, it directly impacts and benefits those parcels.
Now, and the rules are fairly liberal to be applied. For a number of years, the flowers on Washington Boulevard were being paid for out of the RDA. Wasn't coming out of general funds or any of our other tax dollars. Because it benefited the area, right? It made it nicer for people to come and shop and do those kinds of things.
So was Lee's done under this current
Yeah,
RDA?
no, it was done, under the RDA that just expired. When it was new, within just a few years, right, John? Maybe 2-3 years that it had been in place. That's when all of that happened over there.
When it was getting ready to happen is when the city started the RDA.
Say, wasn't the pool kind of the trigger?
No, the
Was it
pool
kind
ended
of
up
right
being
in
a project that came on it after,
Okay,
I think. It was probably part of the discussion, but
that's in that area.
it started when Lee's turned in, or when Acres turned into Lee's.
Yeah.
Or when Acres was built, because it became Lee's later, but
Right.
yeah.
So what's the proposed final amount that we see coming into that CDA?
It will all depend on the value of the developments that happen in the open, right?
So we don't have an estimate?
You really, is hard to estimate. We look at, just 5 years ago, when we were looking at the detention pond that the city owns on 2600, right? We were looking, because that's being sold for commercial development, and we're gonna, when the new pond comes in, not this summer, but next summer, the storm water will be moved down there. The piping's already been laid along Montessori School and all of that, so all that's in place. The value of that land in the last 5 years, what, doubled, John? More than doubled.
Mhm.
What we're going to end up being paid for that is, we wouldn't have even dreamed of making that much on it 5 years, just 5 years ago. And then with the, all of the development that will happen on that, all of the eateries and the different types of businesses that will be built on that entire block there, will just, it'll be huge, and it's really hard to estimate what those values will be, what the values will be as time goes on and inflation hits and everything else, and what the taxing, what kind of taxes will be pulled off of that, and what percentage.
And that's all part of the CDA.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so that's part of the
That is,
RDA.
yes.
I haven't seen the CDA map. I know the RDA map, but I can't think of the CDA map.
Yeah, when we did the CDA, when council did the CDA, like John said, it's kind of like teeth. We looked at where the RDA was and said, it's expiring soon. But we have these other areas that are going to develop, and we want to take advantage of this, so we created the CDA that kind of moved in and out, and the two of them cover just about every square inch of commercial property along those two streets.
So Washington and 2600.
Those are really the, if you think about it, those are really the along 2550, but that kind of counts as 2600 because it all goes across. It's really the only commercial we have in this city.
No, this is just kind of off topic, but just thinking about commercial and areas in there.
Right, hang on, let me do what I did to Brenda.
Where the pond is going and
Yeah.
I'm having a brain on the development around it. Patriot Point. I know that that is a, you guys maybe not.
I don't even know where Patriot
My brain is
The
not.
pond isn't commercial, and there won't be any commercial around it.
Okay, well, the reason I ask is because it's under, I know that it was zoned what Village of Providence Point and what Cooperstown is zoned out, and that
Is that
zone.
mixed use?
Yes, and that zoning requires commercial, so I
The
thought there was
mixed use
discussion
piece,
of.
if I remember right, John, in that whole Patriot Point area over there, the Opikins, the double lot ranch over there was only along 2550.
Correct.
And that, so they were discussing.
And that's where commercial
Would
will
be
be.
viable, but that's connected to that development, isn't it?
Right, if you think of, you've got 2550 up here, and you got double lot that comes all the way
Yeah.
down below the pool and all the way back over to where Patriot Point is. All of this will be residential, and down here is where the pond
You
is.
know,
And so all of this will be residential, and only along 2550, kind of kitty corner from
Mhm.
where our detention pond is. That's the only place that commercial, where that commercial mixed use. would
But
be.
it's not part of the CDA.
No,
That, okay.
any questions? That's the great unifying theory of CDA.
And we won't be discussing that at all, but that is something, like when you pull up a budget, at the very end of it. You'll see the RDA budget, it's a separate budget, but that
Some of
really
the
isn't.
projects that they're doing have that funneled in, or ramp stuff too, which we haven't talked about.
Yeah,
Grants and stuff that the city is kind of.
but is that something that we would have any discussion about? I mean, it's. their
I don't
projects are being
think so.
I
done.
know about, but yeah, it's not necessarily budget related, but.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
see it,
it's
but I
not
think
really,
it's worth knowing what it is, and because it does come up in the, like, you'll see that budget, and when the city council has a budget discussion, they'll go to the redevelopment agent.
And it's helpful to know as you watch council go through budget, they're looking at the future of the city. And
Yeah.
trying to plan. You may hear council talking about, well, is that a CDA qualifying project? And now you know where that money comes from. what the rules and the laws are about where it has to be used and where it can't be used and how it can benefit the city. And that it's money, it's not money coming from you and I out of our property taxes, it's coming out of the business owners. And the increased value of the property that they've developed in the business.
And so you guys have just decided and programmed the 3.4 million roughly. You want to tell us what those projects or what that is? Because those projects will be coming, but that's already been, are coming
John?
down the
John,
pipeline, just so. I think it's
touch on that?
interesting and it's
Yeah.
worth
Oh,
knowing,
yeah.
because when the council's talking about money and where it's coming from, they'll reference and talk about RDA in those discussions, and it's nice to know, okay, this doesn't fall under this budget that we're looking at.
Yeah, so right now, at least 500,000 of that over $3 million is planned to be used to rehab the aquatic center. The idea being that the aquatic center brings a lot of activity into the city from outside. Little Caesars probably sells more pizzas during the middle of the day in the summer because the aquatic center than they would otherwise. But then the rest of it is currently, we're sending the letter out this week to business owners and landowners along Washington Boulevard and 2600, that area, to say, hey, if you need some physical infrastructure improvements to help make your property worth more or to incentivize you to reinvest into your property to make it nicer than it is now, basically you apply for a grant, and then the RDA board will be evaluating those in July will be when they evaluate the letters of intent, and then August, September will be when they evaluate the actual formal proposals. And I believe the city will put in some proposals for things, maybe the trailhead at 1900. So there's that, Coldwater Creek goes along the north side of 1900. We would like to finish that and some other infrastructure for walking, biking, things like that may be applied for by the city. But those are the type of ways that we anticipate that money. People who apply for things like a sewer line upgrade may not be seen as favorable to the RDA board as people who apply for facade upgrades. So if Kurtz wanted to repaint everything and needed a little extra money, then the RDA board might be more inclined to give them the money to help with that, as opposed to if they need a new sewer line.
If you look at this facade, when it was all redone here and they repaved the entire parking lot, they made it. You look at what that ended up spurring, it changed, it caused Wendy's to do a remodel, right? The increased traffic brought in Arby's, it brought in Starbucks. And so the money that was invested to make that strip mall an attractive place and increase the foot and vehicle traffic to it, then spurred further investment from other eateries that create more sales tax, more property tax, all of those things. It just kind of domino affected everything. The little bit of money that we put in for Ace Hardware made a huge difference in traffic. The same with, you think about Smith's Marketplace, right? This strip mall and everything around it is largely successful because of that anchor tenant. Smith's and the vast amount of traffic that it drags along past Walgreens and past Maverick and all of that.
Can I ask a question, John?
Absolutely.
How is finishing that trailhead gonna bring people into the RDA area?
Well, so the redevelopment area plan doesn't just focus on economic, but also just curing blight and solving infrastructure problems.
Okay.
So that's in the plan, is that it's kind of a two-prong component that even just beautifying the area will help incentivize commercial folks to reinvest. A lot of time that we've been focused heavily on the North Ogden Plaza where Kurtz and King's used to be, and that it's trying to incentivize those folks to do a facade upgrade is one of those projects that I think the city has had on our radar for years and years, and we would like to have that look nicer if we could, but it is their private property and they can do what they want with it.
Yeah, and at some point, that property down there, right near Village of Providence Point, where the grain silo still stands, that kind of mini farm that's still in there, that's own commercial. And eventually that will go, and that's in the CDA. And so it may be that the right, just a really bang up awesome business that will draw a lot of people to it will come in there, but they'll be maybe like Smith's, just a hair short, and then the CDA can help cover that little, patch that little bit of shortage and get them in there to benefit the city for decades to come.
Yeah, I get that. I was just curious why the RDA could pay for the trail.
Oh, gotcha.
How do we get bigger restaurants to come down our way?
You have to have more people and be
You have
closer
to
the
change their
freeway.
algorithm by which they decide.
Because we
to
get
come
like
there.
10 Arby's to one.
Well,
We're in a corner.
they've got their algorithms, right? They look at
Yeah.
rooftops, they look at average income. They look at average education level. Those are kind of the three big that they look at, and we do really good on the average income and the average education level. We don't do real good in the number of rooftops in, what is it, the concentrate 3, 5, and 7 mile rings or something like that.
Depending on the groups, they look
Yeah.
3, 5, 7, yeah.
And those
How many
big,
rooftops does Riverdale have?
So when you get to the 7 miles, a lot.
they have a lot, and they have a
They also
ton
have
of
a
traffic.
freeway, so-
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, I think accessibility is a big one too. We're kind of a destination in the city.
But one of the things that's unique and that the Nielsen's, that it took a long time to convince them to build one here, to let a franchisee build one here. And it has been wildly successful and compared to all of its other stores. Not that they're not successful, but they didn't anticipate it to be performing as well as it is already.
Same thing happened with Arby's.
Yeah.
It turned out to be one of the top performing stores in the country. Just that fast and little north.
I think
Ogden, it's crazy.
that they would do better than they see, but I think.
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, but you've got the same problem. We had wieners, it didn't last. So
I think
that's,
that was management. I think that's-
Yeah.
but that could be that you still have one in Burn City, but I think that's part of what we see. Oh, sit down restaurant comes, it doesn't last very long. Zang's has been here, but then it's closed and then it came back. I
That
don't know,
passes
it's just
stuff
my
well.
opinion.
And the development since we're on the economic development topic, the development down in Pleasant View, Rush and all of
Mhm.
those things
That's gonna,
is going to draw more traffic this direction that will,
I think.
a lot of it will come up Washington through North Ogden to get around to it. Because that's where the major population center is, right? So it's gonna come up. And I think that will benefit us economically over
But I don't
time.
see any sit down restaurants.
That's what I
coming in
can
there.
say, I don't.
No, I think
Not there,
Arby's
but
and-
I'll bet you that
Could be more
there's a good
traffic.
chance of things coming in the new development.
I'm not
It
gonna
would be
say
nice.
Yeah, it would be nice.
But we can't, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Yeah,
They
may
eventually
be the
decide
buyers
whether or
that
not
do.
they want to be here.
yeah,
You know,
it's kind of the give take of
yeah.
how big and
And the other,
drawing people in, but.
the other thing is, like you were saying, is that you don't want a business to come in and then all of a sudden close. Yes. That'd be yours.
We want Zeppelin.
I was, since thinking about it too now, that little strip mall that's just right out here at the end of 2600 that has that little bakery in it. Does that fall in the CDA or the RDA?
Actually, I was
But
just looking at the map.
Because I was like, that little thing looks like it's always hanging on by a thread.
Oh, where the hair salon and everything is,
Is that what it is?
or the
No?
new strip.
Chiropractor in there.
Is there, and there's that little
Oh, we're
bakery.
next.
Oh,
next-
over like 7-Eleven, yeah.
They're actually doing pretty
I
good.
know, and I like, we need to support, I love little local businesses like that, but that little strip
So-
mall, I'm always like, oh, please stay in business.
So the strip mall was in the RDA, which just expired.
Okay.
So
Well, maybe
But
someone in there will apply.
they may apply for a facade upgrade or something, and they'd be evaluated like anybody else.
Okay, that's my presentation.
Thank you, that was, I think that was I needed that. And what I didn't understand.
Sure.
So it looks like do we have any comments, you guys, Jamie? do you wanna
What do you want me to
read
say?
anything?
Agenda for next time.
Well, I think tentatively, doing enterprise funds would be a good discussion. I think breaking up the next two. And then that would give us something to kind of prepare for as we look at the enterprise funds budget. And if we have the yellow sheets for it, great. If not, maybe we can scan over those the next meeting when we go. Yeah, well, we can look at the old ones, but maybe we can look at when we do administration on the first of April.
Would it be helpful to the committee to have John and Jamie do a brief explanation of how the enterprise funds revenue is different than all of the other?
For sure.
Because the enterprise funds are not general tax funds, right? They're not property taxes, they're not sales taxes. They generate their own revenue,
Mhm.
which is way different. Different color. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be great as part of our discussion.
Wonder if I could make a suggestion?
Yes.
I don't believe it starts until March, but anybody on
We're
the
in March.
We are. That wasn't what I meant. I don't think that the council budget conversation starts for another couple of weeks. But
Yeah.
I think it would be really helpful for this committee to go to council meetings and listen to the discussions about the budget.
At least online.
Sometimes they're really boring,
You'll be there,
but
right?
it does, yeah. It makes it a little easier to understand, I think.
So how
what
do
we're
you
talking
get
about.
to the link if you want to do it online?
Agenda. So if
You
we
go to the city
John, can you-
webpage.
Pull up the city front page.
So on
When you
each
pull up
agenda,
the agenda, see this little blue thing.
I go through the
Go
calendar.
to northallencity.com.
Okay.
Click on agendas and minutes, scroll down, find the meeting. If you go to the agenda or the packet will have the agenda plus all the supporting documentation. And then you can see the two hyperlinks right there, one for Zoom and one for YouTube.
Okay.
If you want to comment, you want to do Zoom.
Yeah.
I would
I
do Zoom
would
anyway.
suggest doing Zoom. I think it's nice to see how many people are.
Yeah.
Engaged. I mean, but you see how many people are watching. on
do we
YouTube,
track that
but
by chance?
You can do it the next
But
day or the next.
Zoom tells
week
us how
on
many people
YouTube.
come in and,
Yeah, I like the Zoom because I like to be able to.
we've never done like a history.
If you want to.
Oh, they let you?
Oh, yeah.
If you do, if you're on
Not
Zoom.
like our HOA meetings.
So-
That's why that hard. Meetings in public comments, you can raise your hand, John will unmute you. And then you can unmute yourself and
Yeah.
then you can make public comment.
So for example, right now we have Susan watching. And she can raise her. hand. So she's waving at us and that's what you do during public comments.
Yeah, I knew that.
And, but anyways, it's been a great tool. We all should have invested in Zoom as soon as COVID hit.
Yeah.
Although it's come back down from its high point, but
It's interesting how something is great and then when you start going to the HOA board meetings and they just do not like you to know what's going on.
Yeah.
and
Behind the wizard behind them.
and we also pay for an upgraded version of Zoom called the webinar version that allows people to participate without being full participants. So we don't get people just speaking wild, crazy things at any moment they feel.
Harder for us to be.
Oh, sorry, except for the council. They still speak wild and crazy things and everything, right? Oh, not the new one,
Oh,
the old one.
The old ones that aren't there anymore. What are you saying, John? What are you saying?
in particular there?
Wow.
So the next one is on the 16th.
Well, it's on the 12th.
Oh,
City council meeting is on the 12th.
well,
Yeah, so
Yeah, next week will be good.
it shows you the future ones, and when the packets are posted, they'll show up here. So this is the packet for tonight's planning commission meeting.
Yeah,
And in fact, our budget meeting is, or this meeting is here. And that's how Susan got the access, is she went to this and then clicked the Zoom hyperlink. So. And you can even go backwards if you want, look at packets, you just have to change the dates. And you can go backwards, you can't go forwards because we only go out about a month of meetings.
So our next meeting will be March 20th and we will discuss enterprise funds.
the two actions I got were sending out the charter to everybody,
Yes.
sending out the old dealer sheets.
Yes, I think that'd be great.
Miller?
And when we send out the agenda to everyone, we'll send out a PDF of the enterprise funds budget sheet. Whatever, you know, we can get the old yellow sheet and we're
I'll send
gonna send
all
all of them.
Yeah, I'm gonna send all of them
Okay,
for the crazy people that want to actually go through all of them.
and if by chance we have any of the new tentative, we can add that to the agenda. You know.
Yep. Jamie's so full. I can tell.
All right,
One comment that's not budget related is.
Oh, no, we've had all of those tonight.
I know.
Wait, let me,
Have to say that the little open house was very informative.
Oh, it's really nice.
I-
Nice building.
Thank you for the city people that showed the inside of the inner sanctum that we've heard about for years.
And the cookies.
I didn't try any cookies, but
But
okay,
she
they
bought
do.
those.
I still need to go see it. I was,
You did, it was nice.
that's what
Nice
I was
building.
knowing I was.
The tour was great because they had numbers and you followed in it and they had somebody sitting
Rub
at
it
each
in.
one telling you what they did. I am. It was good. You should have gone.
I'm gonna make you give me a tour. We'll talk to
if I
Brittany,
can
see if they'll work it
remember.
out.
Better hurry before all those people move in there.
I think they have.
We can arrange some additional viewings. So.
I really was viewing, planning on that.
A home viewing? Yeah, at this point, to go through, you need to be escorted by someone with BCI clearance. So,
Not me.
So who else is gonna be in there?
police and court. And then council and planning commission will be over there as well. And then, like I said, I think what we're hoping to keep, this group might go over there for a little bit, but we're hoping to keep them in this space at the back in a little conference room about the same size of this table.
So how do you get into it?
East side of the police building.
Oh, okay.
or
Oh, you have to go all the way around?
Don't go that way.
come down Washington at a high rate of speed and then resist a little
And
bit.
then fight
And
them.
you'll get a
There we
personal
go.
visit by a couple of our finest.
They're nice though.
They pull you over, start running, run down the street.
You get
Get
to
out
see
of
all
your
kinds
car
of things,
and
like you don't
run.
have to be chained,
Real
you don't
fast.
have to be handcuffed to the stove anymore, they have actual.
Yeah, they have actual
Oh.
protection to get down places in their measurement.
Now, they built that out for how many years?
Build up
For-
50 to 60 years.
Okay. So it should be sufficient when we reach.
40,000, 42,000 people, yeah.
And it also added life to this building because it allows us to turn this space into additional offices, which should extend this building, I hope, 20 years
So
before we
what-
need any additions.
What's gonna happen to the old police station?
It'll be gone in 2 weeks.
Wow.
Actually, planning commission, it's already in there. For parking.
New parking lot.
Is the parking,
Got to
None
have
of us
a parking.
or
No.
already know this, it's
That's
terrible.
terrible. To get to this meetings here, it's like.
It'll be nice after this.
Yeah.
Surprised the library doesn't ticket us.
Oh, we're gonna ticket library patrons that use our.
Technically, there's a sign down here. you can't
New
park,
revenue.
right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
Thank you.
Meeting